All right.
I feel that these moral choices really reflect the kind of way of living and values that you want to see extant in the world. And I would feel that that adultery is not a very good value. As a matter of fact, it's against one of the Ten Commandments. So I would want you to think about the kind of character that you're building by doing this, and also what kind of a world you envisage for that kind of behavior.
Ms. Smith, you know me. I care dearly about Carol, and this relationship will end in time. I just want you to give me some time. Will you do that?
Yeah.
Will you also not tell Carol?
Yeah.
Great. Miss Quinlan, did you talk to Robert?
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Listen, honey. I think a lot of people are talking about you and Deneen. Maybe none of my business, but let me tell you, if I've noticed it, other people have noticed it, and the other people who have noticed it may do what I wouldn't do, and that's that they're going to tell your wife. So if you value your marriage, I'd suggest that you stop this right now.
Well, you're not going to tell Carol.
I'm not going to tell Carol.
Okay, so
I'm putting you on notice, but I don't want to be unnecessarily hurtful. And maybe it will blow over very quickly, at which point it wouldn't serve any purpose to tell Carol, necessarily. But I want to put you on notice. You're my friend. You deserve that from me.
I assume I don't break off the affair. Is there anyone here willing to talk to Carol?
No.
Anyone do that?
Why?
Ms. Walton?
Why would we want to talk to your wife?
Doesn't she have a right to know that her husband is being disloyal?
Not through my sharing that with her. And I don't know that she has a right to know that her husband is being disloyal. It seems to me that these are very private matters between individuals, and I don't know the basis on which one would butt into the private affairs of their friends.
But it's wrong. Isn't it wrong?
It may be wrong, but I don't see myself as a savior to go around cleaning up the world of all wrong. And those are personal matters, and what right might I to intervene in your personal life?
I'll tell you what I won't do, though, Robert. If I am your friend and Carol's friend, I won't be sitting down at your dinner table anymore. I will not put myself in the position of having to choose if I know about your infidelity, whether you told me or whether I found out. And if I am equally good friends with Carol, all I can do is to step out of this friendship.
Isn't that a cop-out? Isn't that a cop-out? Why
No,
will
it's
no
not.
one go to Carol and say, Carol, you have a right to know that your husband is abusing the marital relationship?
Are you certain she has a right to know? There is a right to innocence, but what there's not a right for is, for me as your friend, to live the lie of your infidelity. And I must say, Robert, as long as we're on the subject, after what you did at Harvard and now this, I'm almost positive you're running for office.
What about, let me give you a little different fact. You're having lunch with Carol, and Carol's saying, our relationship is just great. In fact, it's so great that I've decided that I'm no longer going to use birth control devices, that Bob and I are going to have a child.
You're moving closer to a border that we all, I think, make on our ethical issues. There's the first and the simplest of doing no harm, and then there's the whole other thing of doing good. And the rules are just different for those things, so that when you say, I don't want to do any harm, that doesn't mean necessarily I have an obligation to do good. And you were trying to put on us an obligation to do good. You have shifted to a different moral universe, because now you're talking about our doing harm, or at least being accessory to doing harm, and that brings a whole new set of standards and a whole new set of values into our mind.
Is that right, Dr. Coop? Would you tell Carol?
I would never tell Carol unless Carol came and asked me, then I couldn't lie to her.
You would never tell Carol, even if Carol were your daughter?
Everybody always puts somebody into my family in these situations. If Carol were my daughter, yes, I'd have exactly the same feeling toward Carol in that situation that I had toward you, a very, very close friend that I looked on as my son when you got in that Harvard mess. I would tell her. But I'd take you with me. And we'd talk it out.
Justice Scalia, would you tell your daughter, Carol?
Yeah, I expect I would.
Why?
I think that there are all sorts of concentric circles around us as individuals, and there are some people to whom we have a greater obligation than to others. Some to whom it is not, as was put earlier by Dr. Galen, not just an obligation not to do harm, but affirmatively an obligation to protect or to do good or whatnot. I think that's the kind of an obligation I would feel to my daughter in this case, just as I felt a special obligation to rat on you when you were my son, Bob, although I wouldn't have done so were you not my son. I think that's what makes the difference. We have different degrees of responsibility to different people in the society.
If Carol were my daughter, I would go to her and say, you know, that Robert's a skunk. And he's been showing himself to be one right from that day that he took those test results and copied them. And you ought to get out of this relationship as soon as possible.
You wouldn't hesitate?
No, not if she were my daughter.
I'm not sure that it might not be a good idea for me to go to Robert and say, you know, I have come into the knowledge of this. I'm very disturbed about it. I don't want to interfere in your marital lives, even though she is my daughter. And I think you really ought to know that you're threatened. Being. I mean, just to disclose it doesn't mean that it's good or that, for that matter, it would be constructive.
Faye has now entered into a secret relationship with her son-in-law that excludes her daughter.
Not necessarily. I have not said that I would not necessarily go to my daughter eventually, but what I'm saying is to confront my daughter, blackmail, that I go to him and say to him that I think that you are engaged in activity that is very damaging and potentially harmful to my daughter, and this is something that I'm very disturbed about, and I really think that you ought to consider. It could be a passing phase, that it could, I mean, we all say that we would disconnect ourselves from individuals whom we know are involved in infidelities. That means that we would disconnect ourselves from 3/4 of the human race, it seems to me, adult population. And I don't know that we all go about busying ourselves to disclose what we know about their private and personal conduct.
I'd also be very concerned if it was my daughter, and this is purely selfish. I would be really concerned about the kill the messenger syndrome. Yeah. I would be afraid that I would poison my relationship with my daughter, who would never be able to forget that I was the one who came in and told her the worst news she'd ever heard in her life. And while I understand the point about entering into a conspiracy with Robert, and I don't like that one bit, I think I might have a little bit of a tendency to say, Buster, I know about this, and you can call it blackmail. I'm perfectly happy with that turn of phrase. And if you don't straighten up and tell her or get out, then I'm real inclined to do it.